And at the railroad station, we were greeted by, it seemed to me like hundreds of German soldiers, each one of them holding a dog, a German Shepherd. Now, I wasn't particularly fond of dogs because this agricultural town I lived was always had problems with stray dogs. But I was terrified when I saw that. And to this day, the only dog I can relate to is my dogs, which we get them when they are puppies. I am really scared of dogs, and I would never have a German Shepherd. So they really felt that we needed that kind of a major escort. We certainly didn't feel that we could do a lot of harm to them. And they took us and put us on streetcars. Now, these were not regularly scheduled streetcars. They were special streetcars for the occasion, you know, chartered streetcars. But they run the regular line, and it was like 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock. It was in the afternoon in May, so it was like daylight. And all of Vienna, people were walking all around. So these very strange-looking people, obviously after 2 days of train ride with the yellow star and all that.
You were still wearing the yellow stars,
Yes.
yeah, but in regular civilian clothes.
Civilian clothes, yeah, the yellow star, with baggages, you know, going through all of Vienna. So, you know, I really don't want to know that they didn't know about it because, you know, we went into some kind of a place which they called the Viennese Dispatch Center, which I never knew what it was. And for a long time, for months, that was the first time when we had any kind of creature comfort as people. We were allowed to take a shower, and we slept in a bed all by ourselves. Each one of us had, and they fed us hot food. So we thought that this was really very nice.
Now, how long had you been in the sugarcane factory for?
Not long, about a week or so.
Okay, and
then right, until, you know, all these things happened. And so the next day they got us all together, and they told us what's going to happen to us, and they, for a change, told us the truth. There are lots of places to work, and small groups of you are going to go to different places. And they said that there's a lot of agricultural work. Are there people over here who know how to do agricultural work? And they volunteered, and they were taken to that kind of work. And they didn't ask for anything that we could do, so we didn't volunteer. So we went with the largest group of people. And we were taken to a factory which is still there. It's called Biro und Wagner. Biro and Wagner, that's B-I-R-O and Wagner. And
now, who were the people that were asking for volunteers?
These were German civilians, some kind of officials, and they took one of us as a translator.
And how did they treat you? Do you remember?
And that particular day, they treat us very well. I told you, they treat us very, very nicely. They were really nice to us.
And you were still together with your mother and your grandmother and your aunt. Men and women were together.
Yes, everybody was together. Yes. And they brought in trucks, and they said that we have 30 people going to a farm, and we have 20 people going to someplace else, and then the rest of us, which was like hundreds of, like about 200 people, we went to this factory. Now, we didn't go actually to the factory. We went to a place near the factory which had what we later on always referred to as the small barracks. They were like little barracks that were set up, and that's where we were put in. And we were told what the routine of the camp was. We were given. We still had to wear all the way through. We had to wear the yellow star, all the way through. And we were each given a little cabinet and a red bowl and a spoon, a soup bowl and a spoon. And okay, there is one thing that I didn't talk about. And I think this happened. I'm not sure when this happened. Before, during while we were in this place where they dispatched us, or just after it.
Okay.
But what happened was that we had to be examined medically, and we all had to get undressed naked, and my mother was very much worried because I was a boy, and I was getting on, I was like 7 years old, and she was worried that, and everybody else in the family were women, and she was worried that that she's going to lose me in this process. And she was extremely upset when, all the women were like naked over there, and some of them made comments that this boy is too big to be here and see us like this naked. And my mother got extremely upset because she felt that she has enough problem trying to keep me, and her fellow Jewish women should not help in this thing. Routine of the camp life was that the adults were working in the factory, and in the winter the kids did nothing. We had all kinds of ways to get into trouble, And in the summer we worked we worked in occasional jobs like construction sites. We had to carry bricks. We were taken out to the railroad tracks, and we had to take the weeds out from between the railroad tracks and that kind of stuff. Or we went to a construction site where people were working, and we had to give them water. We were like water carriers and so on. So we did these kind of jobs. In the winter, some of the people tried to organize a school for us, but most of the able-bodied women were working in the factory, so the ones who were there were more like babysitters, because everybody was worried because all these boys and girls together, and some of them were like in early teens, and we played all kinds of interesting games like doctors and things like that, and everybody was worried about us. And this was a giant camp. We were in a small part of the camp. This was a camp which had 40 nationalities, and there was a hierarchy. And the top of the hierarchy were the Russian prisoners of war, and there were thousands of them. And they were treated by and large according to Geneva Convention, and they were all wearing these blue overalls and giant letters of SU, Soviet Union, painted both in the front and the back. And they were working in the factory. My mother worked in the factory in the storeroom, so she got to know a lot of these Russians, and they were telling her that one of the Russians was a Jew. And the Russian soldiers made extraordinary steps to avoid the Germans discovering the fact that this man was a Jew. Not that they liked him so much, they just hated the Germans more. Like, for instance, when they went to take a shower, they would form a circle around him, because in Russia, of course, only Jews were circumcised, and that was a giveaway to the Germans. And by and large, the Russian soldiers were very nice, the Russian prisoners of war were very nice to us. Many of them had children of their own, and we were close to them. There were other kind of prisoners over there. There was French resistance and Italian resistance fighters, and they were extremely belligerent. You see, the Russians were very stoic and very pliable. The French and the Italians were constantly revolting, breaking out of their rooms, and so on. But the most pitiful of them were all the Romanian soldiers. Apparently Romania had made a switch from Germany to the Allied side, and lots of Romanian soldiers were captured and brought to this camp. And they were in terrible shape. They couldn't take care of themselves. They were full of lice. They were undernourished. They dropped dead just walking. They just collapsed. And then the coat that the men had on kept moving because the lice were active in it. It was a very pitiful sight. These were all treated either as, the Russians were treated as prisoners of war. The resistance fighters and the soldiers from the countries which turned against Germany were treated as kind of in between, but at the bottom of the hierarchy were us, because we were treated as political prisoners. And no place did this reflect more than in the food. You were treated, the food was given in a hierarchical manner, and what we got was, every day, a cup of black coffee for breakfast with some kind of black bread. For lunch we had, they brought us on a truck in cans, like the old-fashioned big milk cans, a food which they called dörrgemüse, which was like dried vegetables. What it really was, it was vegetable peeling, mainly potato peeling and squash peeling and things like that, with some kind of a sloppy sauce on that. And that's what they fed us for lunch. And for this wonderful lunch, they brought the adults home from the factory for lunch to eat this. And once or twice a week we got protein, and that was Blutegemüse. That was the same vegetable peelings, but they threw some blood in it. And there were interesting discussions among the Hasidim in the camp. It was okay to eat the blood of an unknown animal, you know. And but
so there were Hasidim?
They ate it.
There were Hasidim?
As a matter of fact, they were in our bar. There were Hasidim, and they were in our barracks. And my grandmother was brought up the old-fashioned way, and she was like a servant to these people. She did their laundry and things like that, because she thought that she's going to be rewarded for this in heaven, because these were holy people and so on. Now, one of the Hasidim was a very interesting guy. He never worked. I never found out what kind of anger he had. He never worked. He was always on the outside. I think he was doing like business for the guards and things like that. And he always had food. And every Shabbos, he would start singing Zemiras and lined up all the kids and teach us to clap and sing Shabbos Kodesh. And he would take a piece of bread for every one of us. I don't know where he got all that bread. Put sugar on it, which again, I have no idea where he got this food from. And each one of us got a piece of bread with a pile, you know, like a lump of big pile of sugar on it, and you know, have a Eastern Shabbos and things like that. So he was kind of, and his name was Pinkas. He had an enigmatic character. I have never figured out what his anger was. My mother worked in the, as I told you, in the store, and my grandmother and my aunt worked in the German officer's kitchen as dishwasher, which was a great job to have because they brought home leftover food. And I don't eat chicken because when I was very young, I saw the show had killed the chickens, and I saw a room full of chicken running around without a head, and I never ate chicken again. And my grandmother, at the risk of her life, would bring me home chicken, and I wouldn't eat it. And my mother used to be besides herself about it. And there was a moral issue involved over here to my 7-year-old, thinking that my grandmother would bring this food home, and I wanted to share it with my friend. And I got severe beatings for trying to do that, because my grandmother says, if I'm going to risk my life to bring this home, you're going to eat it. I'm not going to supply the camp. So
what happened?
They turned the light out, and I ate the food. You know, it's that's what happened. And actually, this gave us enough food that we had coupons for each meal, like meal tickets. And one day my grandmother wanted to buy me a present, and there was this boy who worked in the factory and stole some remnants wood, you know, and built like children baby furniture, you know, like to play with, like doll furniture. And I told my grandmother that I would like to have that, and my grandmother took some of the coupons And she was able to give it to this boy and buy that furniture for me because she was able to supply us with food.
So what did she get for you? Do you remember?
Yes, it was like a table and a chair and a dresser. And that was my prized possession, you know. There was a lady who came in from the Red Cross, and she brought some clothing. And like I got a hat, a fur hat once, from the stuff that she brought in. It was a woman's hat, and everybody teased me, but it was nice and warm. But then I got into trouble because I lost my shoe. My shoe disintegrated. And I was hopping around in my mother's high heel boots because that was the only thing that we had. And one day, a higher level commander of the camp came to see us, and he saw me in the woman's shoes. And he said that, well, how come he has women's shoes? And my mother says that his shoes fall apart and we don't have another one. And he called the commander of our camp and told him to get me shoes. I got the shoes, but my mother got such a yelling, and they didn't beat her, but they screamed at her that why did she say that she needed shoes, why did he embarrass this guy, and all that. But finally I had shoes, which was good. There was a woman who did something which I don't remember what it was, but it was considered, maybe she wanted to escape or something like that. It was considered a major crime. There was like a prison which consisted of one room with only cement walls and floor, nothing in it, and when you were put in there, you were basically in your underwear. And she was put into that room, and everybody thought that they were going to execute her. And in the middle of the night, they woke us all up, and they told us that there is this road which is being built, and if we want clemency for her, we all have to go and we finish this road. And like crazy, we all worked and finished the road, and they let her go, they let her come back with us. And the road, of course, was in lousy shape, so the next day, they sent out a construction crew, picked up the whole thing and did it right. And